Welcome to Global Vid, a podcast about original productions and international TV and film distribution. I'm your host, Eric Y. Lapointe, and we're about to learn how people in our industry are expanding their footprint and finding the right partners around the world. This show was created by Now Global and is also available as an audio format on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast application. Welcome to Global Vid Season 2 and our Part 2 conversation with Dave Noll, a creator from the United States who has gotten 60 plus shows greenlit. Imagine that. And that is with his business partner, Cleve Keller. The two have created shows like Chopped and America Says and you name it. I basically tried to list everything in the first episode, but in this episode, we go from the one-on-one of pitching to more details and the mechanics that go behind creating a format, and also the mechanics and the formula that one needs when creating a game show. Please stick around. You're going to learn a whole lot more again today. Let's continue our conversation right now with Dave Noll. First of all, there's two topics I want to talk about. I want to talk about the formatting side of the business, which we started talking about last time with Chopped. And then also, you talked a lot about creating game shows at the beginning of Part 1. And I'd love to kind of find out a little bit more about the mechanics about what makes a great game show. So let's start with the formatting of shows, because I know that when you're creating shows, you're thinking about how to make it that a $100 million idea, and how can this show travel? So you mentioned America Says was created with the idea that it could be Australia Says, it could be UK Says, etc. So please tell me about the formatting business, because also it seems a little bit underdeveloped, ironically, in the US. The US makes shows for Americans, and people might be really surprised. At least I learned this in one of my past podcast episodes with Sophie Ferron of Media Ranch in Montreal.
Who is brilliant, by the way. She's absolutely brilliant.
Oh, she is.
Legend.
She told me that most shows that we see on TV, like American Idol and Big Brother, none of these concepts originated from the United States. And I bet you a lot of Americans would be surprised about that.
Yeah.
But here you are in the US trying to get these ideas through that will become formatted. Tell me a little bit more about the infrastructure for formats in the US, because I imagine you've partnered with certain partners that have helped you go towards that goal. And I imagine that perhaps other networks that you've worked with might have thought, oh, this will be a great show in the US, without really thinking about the whole global opportunity.
The reason that is the truth is simple. In the US, our whole infrastructure is set up to favor big business. So there are buyers that are awesome to work with, and then there are buyers that are not good to work with. But no matter who you're working with, the business side of unscripted TV is never set up to, in the US, to benefit the show creator. So no one's really there with the mindset of, oh, this show could be a hit around the world. Whereas in Germany, Spain, Scandinavia, so many countries, so many territories, the mindset is really tilted towards, traditionally, the show creator. And the thought that, oh, I could create something like The Voice or Big Brother or Millionaire, and then from a network in Scandinavia or the UK or Israel, it could then go all around the world, and not only the creator can make money, but also the first buyer can also make money. And so the industry is stacked against us in that way. It is what it is. On the other hand, we're pitching in one of the biggest markets in the world, and certainly the market with probably the most money, or one of them.
Why is it that they're not thinking globally from the start?
It's just set up differently. Every network executive, almost every network executive, is just thinking very small. They're all thinking viewers, ratings. That's it. They're just thinking, how can your show influence my demographic? Or they're streamers now. They're thinking globally. So that's a different thing. Now, when you're talking to Netflix, when you're talking to Disney Plus, when you're talking to Amazon, now we're saying, look, Cleve and I have been doing this for years. We know better than anyone else in the United States what a hit show could then become. And Netflix now gets it, right? And you are seeing multiple versions of Nailed It in multiple languages and how valuable that is for them. But again, most people aren't as smart as Barry Diller, so they don't understand it. They have to experience it themselves. You have to repeat it to people multiple times. This particular type of show that we're about to pitch you not only is awesome and not only is eye-catching and not only, changes television in one small, powerful way, but also we could do multiple versions in multiple languages. And most of our shows you can shoot in a day, or you could shoot 6 or 7 episodes in a day. And we're kind of teaching people how valuable that is.
Given that in some cases, some of the partners that you're working with may not be thinking globally.
Yeah.
Because it sounds to me like you do get involved in the sales side of things to a certain extent, to the extent that you can. How do you get involved in the sales side of things so that whoever you're partnered with is thinking globally?
Diller's whole mindset, at least as we took it, was pitch something that has the potential to be extremely valuable, whether it's going to help you or whether it's going to help the buyer or whether it's going to help whoever, the international format division. But his thought was, the bigger the potential for the show, at the end of the day, you and Cleve are going to make more money, right? Like his thought was, at the end of the day, the bigger the shows, the more success that, at that point we hadn't had 1,000 episodes and now we're up to 3,300. And he was completely right. Even though there's no easy path, the bigger the potential for the show, the more valuable everything is. And the more valuable Cleve and I then have become. And so it just depends. We tackle every single moment of the process with excitement and with outstanding ideas. We don't just say, hey, there's America Says, there should be Australia Says. We go into it with much more knowledge about what buyers are looking for in Australia. It is different than what buyers are looking for in the US. The benefit of this particular format versus another particular format, the existing success, I think it's Australia. I could be wrong, but I think I'm right, where Family Feud has recently done very well. And America Says is in the same space as Family Feud. It's a very different show. I mean, I'll be honest, and I love Family Feud, and Family Feud's been on the air for, 40 years.
Forever.
I think America Says is a better show for 2021, 2022. And there's obvious reasons that I could make the argument for, and you couldn't argue against it. It's a funnier show. Family Feud needs Steve Harvey. We have John Michael Higgins, and John Michael Higgins is brilliant, by the way. But the format has humor inside the show that Family Feud just doesn't have. And so you need Steve Harvey.
Right. It's so dependent on the host.
Yeah. America Says we are much less dependent on the host. If we had a mediocre host, I am not a comedian. When I hosted the run-throughs, I killed. They were enormously funny. And that's when we knew, oh, this is going to be a giant hit. It wasn't me. It wasn't like I got funny all of a sudden. It was the show. The format is really good.
Yeah.
So we're working with Sony and the Game Show Network on America Says. Eric, if they were smart, they'd be listening to me and they would be making more money than they are now. They should do it. They should do that.
Speaking of Family Feud, here in Canada, we just 2 or 3 years ago, they finally brought the format into Canada. So there is Family Feud Canada, and they did choose a Canadian host, which makes perfect sense. And
of course,
and we have our requirements here too to make it Canadian content. And that comedian is Jerry D, and he does a great job, not at the level of Steve Harvey, but at the same time at a level that is actually perfect for Canadians. And then meanwhile, Steve Harvey did I don't know if you heard about this, but he kept the format rights himself and sold it to South Africa. But he ended up going down to, I guess it was Johannesburg or wherever,
to host.
And he hosted the show in South Africa. But of course, they love him. He's so popular there as a comedian that it made perfect sense. And then of course, I saw some episodes where there were actually other comedians from South Africa that were chosen to be part of the show. And it was funny.
So if Jerry D was hosting Family Feud Canada, it's going to be, say, this funny, right? It's kind of what you're saying. Yeah. Steve Harvey's here. Jerry D's here. If Jerry D was hosting Canada Says, when Dave Noll hosted, and I hosted it 60 times before we got it on the air, and I was getting enormous laughs, Jerry D would kill hosting Canada Says. And that's why it's such a great format. And it wouldn't be hard to prove that to anybody, because all you need to do is watch the John O'Hurley version of Family Feud or the Richard Karn version of Family Feud. Those were the hosts before Steve Harvey. And you immediately can see and say, oh, Family Feud as a format isn't funny. It's not inherently funny. It's just Richard Dawson was amazing. He was awesome. And with the format, which is brilliant, lifted it to enormous heights. Then they had a series of hosts that weren't great. And then Steve Harvey is as good, actually better than Richard Dawson. He came 30 years, 20 years later. America Says as a format is just funny. We have this weird thing, which we didn't even plan. It was when you put a clock on a team and you give them the first letter of the answer. And our first one was when I'm in church, I'm usually thinking about blank. And then we put 7 answers up and we gave everyone the first letter. So one of those answers is sleep, right? When I'm in church, I'm usually thinking about sleeping. That was actually a very popular answer. It's like number 4. The first run through we ever did, that was the first question. And it was like a 60-year-old lady playing this run through in this crazy room on 8th Avenue in New York City. And she's there with a couple other ladies and they're a team. And I go over and I say, hey, everybody, welcome to America Says. Here's your first question. We asked America, when I'm in church, I'm usually thinking about blank. Let's put the answers up on the board. We put the clock on. We start the clock. She looks up. She sees the letter S. The answer is sleep. I know it's sleep. She panics, has to answer. That's the format. And she goes, sex. Now, Eric, that's funny on so many levels, but like immediately that's funny. So that we buzz, we go to the next player. They get, by the way, G was up there, which is God. But she saw the S and said sex. So they get some answers. And then we go back and, it's someone else's turn and they see the F and F is football and they can't help but want to say a bad word. So they end up going flaw. And everyone knew what they were trying to say. And it's just the format of the show. So everyone bursts into laughter. The clock ticks down. We go to the next beat. All I have to do to make everyone laugh for the rest of the episode is just look at the old lady who said sex. On the next question, all I have to do is say, well, we know what you're obsessed with. And that's it. And people are dying laughing. And the whole half hour is funny. Family Feud as a format can't do that. It's cool. America Says is a better format for comedy. And for what you want, which is a great, big, shiny floor show that could, an 80-year-old lady could love it, and my 14-year-old daughter could love it, and somebody in Germany could love it, and somebody in Australia could love it, and someone in the UK could love it.
So is that part of what you're thinking when you're creating these formats, is to make it as co-viewing as possible? I mean, Chopped is a perfect example of that. My kids love it. And of course, an 80-year-old grandmother would love it.
And it's become part of our filter where it's like, we're only pitching shows where you see a clear, concise path to $100 million. We're only pitching what we call blue sky, big tent, 8 to 88 shows, which is your 8-year-old could be in the room and you're thrilled, and your 88-year-old grandma can be in the room and you're thrilled. We want the version of TV that we see in our heads. Cleve and I picture those big, giant Got Talent sets, the big, giant Celebrity Family Feud sets, the winning moment where the whole family jumps up and hugs each other and are crying because they just won $50,000 or whatever. That to us that's television. That is a game show.
So did Netflix nail it with Nailed It? Sorry, that's
they did. Yes. As soon as we saw it, we were like, you got to see it. You got to see it. It's inspirational in a reverse way. The Chopped is inspirational because you're watching and you're like, you're like, oh, maybe I could do that.
Yeah.
I could add the butter or the brown sugar in that way. And Nailed It is inspirational in the opposite way, where you're watching, you're laughing, it's enjoyable. You're saying to your kids, come in here and watch this with me. And you're thinking, oh, I could do better than that. I'm not a complete mess.
Right. Well, I think I told you that our family did a home version of Chopped, and we filmed that. We also did a home version of Nailed It. And let me tell you, we did not nail the cake. It was not bad. My team won, by the way.
And the whole show is great. Nicole Byer is so great. Almost every single time throughout history, a huge hit unscripted show has a great format, which is it's always very, very simple to describe.
Yeah.
There's one piece, just one thing that's unique, that's highly promotable. It has to have a host, like when Seacrest does American Idol. He's the perfect host. Jeff Probst for that show, Nicole Byer for that show, Ted Allen for Chopped, Steve Harvey for Family Feud. These are perfect hosts for the show. John Michael Higgins for America Says. It's like you couldn't have gotten anybody. He's perfect. You need a great format that's really simple that people get right away. There's no struggle. You need some sort of highly promotable hook, and you need the perfect host.
So what comes first? Like you're coming up with these concepts, and you're saying one of the key elements, and it's almost like the last element, is the host. The host has to be killer. When does the host come into play when you're pitching?
I mean, almost always at the end, once you've sold it. That now you're looking for the perfect person.
So the broadcasters and the buyers are not concerned about who the host will be just yet.
They are. So you need a list of here's the perfect people. And that's actually harder to do than it should be. I have it on my phone, a thing that says star, because I wanted it to appear high in my notes. And in all caps, it says hosts. And then it has the date because I constantly update it. And it is just literally a list of awesome talent that we would love to work with. And it's got to be 200 names now. And basically what you're doing is you're sliding through that list and going, who would be the perfect 3 people to mention? We have a new game show we're going to start to pitch in a couple of weeks. For that show, we'll have a list of 3 names that we think would be the ultimate host if we sold that show to the ultimate buyer, which is probably Netflix or Fox or ABC, let's say. So we'll have a list of 3 names that would work for any of those buyers. And then those names would probably work for any buyer, right? So you have that list and it paints a picture, and it can't be crazy. It can't be like Oprah, Michelle Obama. Like it's got to be real people who we think we could actually get.
Right.
And that helps paint the picture of the show. But you don't actually go out to those people until you have the series, usually. With Chef Lovely, who I was talking about on our last episode, we developed the show with her, and it is uniquely her personality. That said, Cleve and I have gone through the process of, would this be the perfect show to sell to Australia? Would this be the perfect show to sell into the UK? And the answer is yes. Different hosts, but there's talent that exists all over the world that you could pop into this particular format that would be perfect. It is a standalone cooking competition like Chopped or so many others, but visually and the tastes of the show and the images of the show are younger and funner and sexier.
I have one question that comes to mind. Because you're a creator and not necessarily a producer, or maybe you also consider yourself a producer.
We also produce because you need to hang on every moment until that machine is running, until it's so successful that it's all running smoothly.
But do you find a producer with you to bring on board for the pitching process?
No, we usually have like host, but they don't ask that question. So we just have people in mind. We know, oh, we're going to use this person or this person.
Because, most creators, especially when they're starting out their careers, the first question that might be is, who's producing you? Because if you have no experience, you can't. It's different in your case. You've done 50 plus, 60 plus shows. That's a different situation. So you can probably get inside the room. Now, the creator, the first question they're going to get asked is, who's behind you? You need a production team.
First of all, your show's probably not great. Second of all, you don't just need a great show. You need the whole thing. If you've never done a game show before, you're not going to sell it to Fox. You're just never going to. It's never going to happen. You need to suck me into going with you, or you need to work with a director who's done it before and bring them into the pitch. You need, something. So
Right.
They go, oh, this whole thing is well thought out.
So before we move on to the game show mechanics, I still want to ask, especially since this show focuses so much on international, there was one of your shows that you went directly and sold it to Japan. Can you please walk me through that just a little bit?
It was crazy. According to the Japanese broadcasters, we were the first show creators to ever sell a show into Japan. We were the first directly into Japan, right? They had done versions of other things, formatted versions, but sell an original into Japan. And we did it twice. So we were first and second. Neither show took off, sadly. Our world is you fail most of the time. So neither show took off. But one show was called Unbeatable. It's this amazing game show where you're putting together from your world a team that it's a trivia show, a quiz show, and you're putting together a team that you think is unbeatable. So it's not just you're putting together, oh my gosh, that guy down the street, he knows everything about sports. I'm going to put him on my team. This lady knows everything about, celebrities. I'm going to put her on my team. My cousin knows everything. So that was a show we were pitching. And at that point in time, there were Japanese executives that were looking for originals. And so we sold them Unbeatable, and we sold them a show called You versus America. In Japan, it ended up being called You versus Seven. And it was crazy. We sold it. We went to MIP. And at that point, we were working with Barry Diller. He was nice enough to rent us a yacht when we would go. We'd work crazy hard, but then you got to sleep on a yacht, and we had our own staff. So they would make you food, and it was amazing.
And would you hold your meetings on the yacht too? Was that your stand?
Yeah. And you'd create a show in the living room of the yacht is where you'd pitch the show. So we designed the pitch with the TV screens and even the seating arrangement of the yacht itself. So a buyer from France or Japan or wherever would come in, sit on the couch. You'd offer them rosé. They would say, it's only 10:30. You would say, we're at MIP. Who cares? And then usually it was me. I would host the game. So you'd explain it very little, and then you'd just play the game.
And you did these in half-hour pitches?
Yep. 10, 10:30, 11, 11:30, 12, 12:30. Then you break for lunch. You have 1 to 2 lunch on the yacht. It was great. And then 2 o'clock, 2:30, 3:30, up until 6 o'clock. And then I would just die. Like I would crash. And also you're drinking a lot of rosé and coffee. It's the whole thing. And so you do that for 3 days, constantly trying to get people to come back. That's the whole thing. So you'd say to a buyer from Scandinavia, who's the production company, they loved it, right? They would love the show. Then you'd say, who would be the best buyer? And they would be like, yeah. I'm already thinking about it. Are they here? Yes. Do I have a meeting set up with them already? If not, bring them. When we'll set it. It's Monday. Bring them back Tuesday, later today, whatever. Bring them back Wednesday. And now you'd have the production company with the buyer there live. Now they're all playing the game. That was our job for 3 straight days.
Yeah.
And then the best part by far was by Tuesday in the afternoon, if you were doing it well, you'd have these pitches where the production company from France was there and France 2 was there, all in the room. And because the original meeting was set up with Australians, the Australian production company was there and Channel 7 was there. And so you'd have Australians, Japanese, French, all in the yacht, everyone drinking rosé, everyone playing this game, loving it. And just then they go out and they just tell everyone, who has the best show is Cleve Keller and Dave Noll. That is the best show, that definitely of this particular MIP. So when it worked really well. And we sold a lot of shows.
So I think the one takeaway people won't be able to do is getting a yacht with Barry Diller's money. But that's a great story nonetheless. And the fact is your pitch was a show as well.
Exactly right. That's what you need. We replicated that same thing when we, early on, I would just walk from by myself or with Cleve or with whoever we were working with. You'd walk from booth to booth to booth to booth to booth. But the essence is, if you're going to sell a game, it's got to be awesome. And they're playing it and they're falling in love with you and the game and the title and the promise of what it could mean for their network.
Yeah.
All at the same time. And there were MIPs, by the way, where my shoes broke and I was walking around in the rain with holes in my shoes. So it wasn't all yachts and rosé.
So we have a little bit of time left. I would like to talk about the mechanics of a game show, because from what I've heard and the little I've heard about game shows is that it's not as simple as you think. You really have to have, can I say this way, a mathematical method and process and kind of a formula, basically.
Absolutely.
So what is the secret sauce? What is the secret formula of a good game show?
The first and most important, and you can tell this when you look at the big shows, right? Which are in America, Wheel of Fortune, Family Feud, Jeopardy. Those are the biggest ones. But then go Millionaire. The legendary game shows are all, first of all insanely simple. Like Wheel of Fortune, you put that board up and you don't know every rule, obviously, but you basically know, okay, when you hit the $700, there's letters that light up and you're trying to solve that puzzle. Like, it's not hard. When my kids were young, you'd put on Wheel of Fortune and they got right away when the letters light up and then Vanna flips them over. That's going to spell out a phrase or something. And I got to try to guess what it is. So crazy simple. Jeopardy, simple. Family Feud, simple. That is the first gigantic mistake that everyone makes, is I feel like people don't trust their great ideas enough. So we get pitched. First of all, we don't really take pitches anymore, almost ever. Years ago, we would take tons of pitches and it would just be horrendously complicated game shows, one after another. Like, if you can't describe to me the hook of a game show and the basic rules in like 2 sentences, you're done. It's never going to work. It's terrible. Don't do it. Jeopardy was, every quiz show before that was, we give you the question, you give us the answer. Jeopardy, the first time ever, we're going to give you the answer and you have to give us the question. That's brilliant. It's amazing.
How does the formula keep everyone engaged throughout the entire half hour?
And that's when you have a simple game, it can't have just one element, but when the game is simple, Wheel of Fortune is just Hangman, which kids play in the car. And it took a while because I think that show, as I recall, had 2 different pilots. And the first one, the title wasn't as good. I think it was called Shopper's Bazaar at first. I think that was it. I think I know my history well enough. And it didn't have the wheel. And then they added the wheel and they changed it to Wheel of Fortune. And now all of a sudden it's an enormous hit show. So it has to have, like what we say is there's a layer of great, simple game. And then there's one layer of sizzle, sexiness, the wheel on Wheel of Fortune. Family Feud. That game is great, right? You know, we asked 100 people, top 5 answers on the board. That's great. The sexiness, that sellable hook is no show before that was one family against another. Every other show was 2 contestants or 3 contestants standing on an empty stage. This was 10 people, 5 against 5 with a host. That's 11 people on a stage. It automatically seemed huge. That's sellable back in 1976.
And could it be, because it's just making me realize too that a good game show has this element to say that a family can be sitting down watching it and go, we could do that.
Yeah.
We could apply and be on Family Feud.
And like Millionaire, again, it had both things. The game itself, deceptively awesome, right? You could say, well, it's just a trivia question, but that it's a trivia question and they give you the 4 answers. Now any moron can play. Even if the question is, you know, who was the king of England in 1670? I don't know that. I'm never going to know that, right? But if you give me the 4 answers, I can pretend I'm smart and be like, oh, I'll bet that was Henry VIII. And the should you go higher is a great hook, but there's a great gameplay element. Because now I'm yelling to the TV.
Right. Keep the money. Run.
I think it was Mark Goodson who created many, many game shows, or didn't create, produced many, many game shows with his partner, Bill Todman. So it was Mark Goodson and Bill Todman. But decades ago, he said, what we look for in a new show is are the viewers talking to the TV? And I was just watching Survivor last night, and we were talking to the TV. We're talking to the TV. Who should they team up against? Who should they vote out? It's the best part of Survivor that you don't really think of. Yes, there's an island. Yes, there's things. They're starving. The best part, for the reason why that's a hit, is because you're talking to the television. Wheel of Fortune, Family Feud, you're talking to you can't help yourself. Chopped, you can't help yourself, no matter who you are. And I've watched it with audiences. People talk to the TV. Which dish do you think is going to get chopped next? Which chef are you rooting for? You're talking. You can't help yourself.
And that's, I guess, what makes a great finale. In each of those cases you brought up, the finale is amazing. And you're right. In each case, you are talking to the TV. Or like in the Family Feud case, you want to give out your own answer and see if you can beat out.
And that makes you feel like you're there. You're talking about those great endings. American Idol, Family Feud, Pyramid, Wheel of Fortune. The ending of the show, because now you've talked to the TV for 22 minutes or an hour, you're in. You're sucked in. Survivor, you're there with them. You're like, why? Why aren't they voting off Jimmy? Jimmy clearly is the worst person in the world. He's going to manipulate. He's going to be, why? And then either they vote off Jimmy and you're like, yes, and you feel it. I was right. They did the right thing. They voted Jimmy. Or you feel, yeah, they voted off Kelsey. She's the best. Everybody loves Kelsey. What are you doing?
Are these real people? Because I haven't watched Survivor in a
while. No, I'm just thinking about it. But that's Family Feud. You're playing along. So when that family is going and he's like, all you need is 9 more or 15 more. And that thing flips over and it's 17 on the last one. And you know, that family just won $25,000. At that point, you've played along the whole time and now you're feeling it with them. And maybe you don't jump up and down and hug each other like they do, but emotionally you're there. And that's, you know, America Says or Chopped or any of the shows that we pitch. That's our goal, where you're by the end of the episode, you've talked to the TV a bunch and now you feel like you're part of it. And so when they win, it's a great feeling. And you're like, oh, I like this feeling. I would like to watch another episode.
Sounds a lot like sports, right? Like
it is very similar.
You're watching and you're rooting for your team, and if the team wins in the end, you're super stoked.
And that's why Chopped in particular, its success was surprising to the Food Network because most of their shows weren't 50-50 shows. They leaned female or they leaned male, but men loved it just as much as women. And the message boards were interesting. Often women said, I love Chopped because it reminds me of that moment where I have to cook for my family and I'm looking at what I have and I have no idea. And I'm looking at my pantry or my shelves and I'm like, what am I going to cook tonight? Men often said that, by the way. They also said that. Men often said, I like it because it's like a sporting event. I can figure out someone right away to root for. And then I'm watching and I know it's going to be over in an hour. I'm not going to sit there. I'm not waiting for like Master Chef or Top Chef. You need to get invested. I got to watch this for the next 7 months. Chopped, it's over in an hour. So it's like a sporting event.
All right, Dave, thanks so much for your generosity and advice. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you today. I feel a whole lot smarter just for talking.
I feel smarter
with you about learning about unscripted content. And so if people want to reach out to you and connect, what's the best way to do that?
LinkedIn is by far the best way. And just, find me. I'm Dave Noll, DaveNoll.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. It's been awesome.
And that concludes Global Vid's 2-part series with Dave Noll. If you missed part 1, check it out for some great pitching tips. Thanks to Dave Noll, our editor Nicole Almeida, and our theme song composers Amber Goodwin and Aaron Ross. See you next time.